I'm out here just east of Jansenville on a farm that we're doing some research on. And the question that we're interested in is, how do the succulent shrubs and the C3 trees, in this case Portulacaria afra and Euclea undulata, coexist in this landscape? Because they've got very, very different photosynthetic types and very different strategies in kind of existing in this landscape. So spekboom, Portulacaria afra, is a facultative cam, so it can go into crassulacean acid metabolism. That means that when it's under stress and in cam mode, it opens its stomata at night, gets carbon dioxide, makes it into crassulacean acid, closes its stomata during the day, and then uses that stored CO2 for photosynthesis. C3 trees can't do that. They have to open their stomata during the day, get their carbon, and then they can photosynthesize. Spekboom is a facultative cam because it can actually switch to the C3 mode. But what we're interested in is, how do these things coexist? And one of the ideas that we have is that there's actually a niche partitioning that's going on at the root level. And so the concept is that these trees can generate far more water pressure potential, so far more suction out of their stems, so they can get more moisture out of the soils than the succulents can. And succulents, so these guys can't generate a lot of water pressure potential. They can't generate a lot of suction to get moisture out of the soil. And so they've got to rely on these rainfall events. Whenever there's a little bit of rain, they've got to be able to suck up as much moisture into their roots. I mean, so this is a spekboom root. It can be up to 60% moisture. The stems can be up to 65% moisture, and these leaves can get up to 90% moisture, which is incredibly high. So it's like a sponge. This is the sponge on the landscape, and these are the kind of hardy plants that rely on being able to develop these really strong water pressure potentials, these ability to really create a huge amount of water tension in the xylem to be able to suck moisture out of the soil. So our hypothesis is that spekboom and the other succulents need to keep their roots very close, very shallow across this landscape, so whenever there's a rainfall event, it can suck up this moisture. Whereas in this case the Eucleas, the C3 trees, don't need to do that. They can have their roots deeper down the soil profile. They'll probably have some roots in the upper layers, but they'll also go much deeper because they can harvest water out of the soil at far lower, what's called a soil water potential. They can really get their suction going. So I'm busy sitting in a pit here, and let's see what we see in between these two plants. Okay, so spekboom roots are really nice to tell because they've got this flakiness on them. So what we've got here is lots of spekboom roots right on the top, and here we've got lots of rain roots. These are all spekboom roots. Why we chose Euclea is because they've got black roots, very easy to tell. So there's some Euclea black roots. There's a rain root, a Euclea black rain root. Let's see what else we've got here. This is something different. I don't know what this is. We're looking. There's another black root. That's a Euclea there. Here we go. We've got a lot of black roots there. So far we've got that's black Euclea rain roots there. So we've got spekboom roots and Euclea roots in this top level here. There's some more black roots there. I wonder what this is. I mean, there's a bunch of other species in here as well. So the reason why we chose Euclea was because the black and the spekboom is really easy to tell. This is a different species as well over here. And so as we go down, so we're sitting now at about 10 centimeters, about 20 centimeters, there's still spekboom roots coming out. But if we look on this side, we've still got a lot of the euclea roots. There are the rain roots coming out there. There's another root there. There's more roots down here. Down here. You can see the black. Oh, there's even a black root all the way at the bottom there. We're sitting at maybe about 40 centimeters, maybe 45 centimeters. There's no spekboom roots down here. No emergent roots. That's another euclea root there. Euclea root, euclea roots, euclea roots. Lots of euclea roots. More euclea roots. Spekboom roots kind of stop at this I was going to say maybe 25 centimeters. So there's this definite niche partitioning that's going on here in terms of the trees can harvest water all the way down this profile because they can create that huge amount of suction and get moisture out of relatively dry soil that's still got some moisture. Spekboom can't do that, so these succulents have got to be in this top profile layer to be able to, whenever there's rainfall events and the soil gets wet, be able to suck up water while the soil's fairly saturated with water. So what that means is that if you imagine there's a rainfall event, this gets wet, and so spekboom will start, all the succulents will start sucking up the moisture, storing it in their stems, storing it in their leaves, and the trees will be using the moisture at the same time, but at some point the soil dries just a little bit. There's still moisture in the soil, but these don't have the suction capacity. They don't have the suction capacity to get that moisture out of the soil. These guys still do. And so they'll carry on harvesting here, and remember that moisture probably makes its way down the soil profile, but it'll be so bound to the soil that it can't be accessed by spekboom, but these guys can. So there's partitioning, there's a water niche partitioning that's going on, which allows these species to coexist. And this kind of brings me to the point of, this is a degraded landscape out there. This should be covered in thicket and a lot of spekboom, and we're restoring this landscape with spekboom. And there's the question of, are we not this, I hate the word monoculture, because monoculture is you plant a single species and you remove all the other species. We're not doing that in thicket restoration using spekboom. We're adding plants and we're adding spekboom into this system. And then the whole thing is, well, are they going to be competitively outcompete the other trees? Well, outcompete the other species. Well, when it comes to the succulent versus the tree debate, there's not going to be competition because of this water partitioning that's happening, this kind of root niche partitioning that's happening in the soils. So these guys will carry on getting their moisture long after the succulents have stopped being able to get moisture out. Anyway, I think this is a fascinating, ecology is just amazing. And it's a fascinating kind of addition to our understanding of how thicket ecosystems operate. I just want to add an addendum to the video because when I turned around I saw, there's even a better example here. Look at all these rain roots in the top 15 centimeters. This has kind of been picked up by the machine when we excavated this, so this is a little bit fluffier than it is. But you can see how many rain roots there are at the top. And then we go down to the bottom there. Let's clear these away. These are all fallen down there. You can't see any emergent roots down there, but you can see the euclea. There's the euclea roots down there. In fact, it's easier to look if we come onto this side. Let's look at the top here. That's the soil layer about there. About there. You can see the spekboom roots there. And there are all the euclea roots. Further down. That just fell there. And this is even a big kind of tap root for the eucleas, or at a much lower level. So here you can see the spekboom roots, and we switch into euclea-dominated roots down here. Spekboom, in fact, you can almost see a line here. There's spekboom there, there's euclea way below there. And there's something else that's not euclea, but these black roots. It's really nice to be able to use eucleas and spekboom together. There's some spekboom roots right next to euclea roots down there. Anyway, just thought to get a different angle on it. So this is another hole that we've dug in this thicket clump that's spekboom dominated, and we've put it just kind of a quarter into the spekboom clump. And what's really interesting here is, firstly, this is the litter layer, and you already see the roots that are in the litter layer right there. So your litter layer is dominated by these spekboom rain roots. They are just really there to suck up just about anything that falls. But so we just have a look. Just look at this rich litter layer that's going on under here. Yeah, you've seen this from me many times. The amazingness of spekboom and its litter layer that produces very, very thick, very dominated. And if I scratch away, you can see the roots starting to emerge. So that's still in the litter layer itself. It's foraging for water in the litter layer. But the other thing that happens is that this soil becomes very fluffy and soft. You can kind of break it fairly easily. If I were to go out away from the spekboom clump, I'd need a hammer to be able to do this. And one thing that I've realized is that when it's soft like this, I think the water makes it further down, and we get spekboom roots that go further down, much further down the profile. So there's a spekboom root at maybe about 40 centimeters, 35, 40 centimeters. There's some more. There's some more spekboom roots. Yeah, there's a spekboom root there. I'm quite deep down now. And the reason why is, so firstly there's more carbon going into the system, but there's a lot more bioturbation as well. There's a lot more insect movement, earthworm movement, that is making the soil very fluffy, and the water makes it far deeper here. And so I think the roots here, I mean, most of the roots are dominated at the top. I would say, let me guess, maybe 80 to 90% of all the roots are in this top section. But when you've got the magic of this increasing infiltration, whenever there are large rainfall events, the water makes it further down, and so spekboom does start foraging further down in a spekboom clump. When it's out in the open out there, they'll only be in the top 20 centimeters or 30 centimeters or so, not any deeper. Now 20 centimeters is an odd one at like 30 centimeters. But here, it looks like there are a lot more roots that go deeper down. That's something else. That's not spekboom. That's spekboom. That's not spekboom. So yeah, this is quite a profile that's quite dominated by spekboom. Anyway, so there's a proviso to the foraging. But that said, I think that you'll see 3 roots in here that'll carry on getting moisture out of this after spekboom stop being able to get moisture out of these soils. Oh, just a nice money shot of this leaf litter there. Just always amazes me. Look at all of that. In a semi-arid system, we're getting, 300 mils of rainfall. And we're getting, and this is just so alive with animals. We were counting how much litter was being produced, and so we're collecting all of this, and it was just teeming with spiders and insects and worms, and we found a frog. It's just this is such an amazing environment versus what happens when you degrade the felt and you've got this. I think you'd struggle to find much diversity on that. Anyway, so things operating slightly differently underneath these clumps because the nature of the soil has changed, and so the nature of water infiltration has changed. So the fact that we're getting roots down the bottom there means that water has to be penetrating far enough for the soil to become saturated enough that spekboom can get water out of the soil. It's kind of like an indicator of how much better the water infiltration is underneath this than it is out in the open here. And just out of interest, here's another pit we've dug, and you can just see how these roots just dominate the upper sections of the profile. And you don't find those roots. Sorry, it's not a good angle. You don't find the roots anywhere further down. That's not spekboom there. None of that's spekboom. You've only got spekboom up the top here. Okay. Hope you enjoyed it. Ciao.